since suffering as well as joy comes with being human, I urge you to remember this. Violence is what happens when we don't know what else to do with our suffering.
Is there some way you begin a meeting in the Quaker tradition that other people
just
can
with
do?
silence.
With silence. Well, that's always good on video.
Right.
Especially
Works great on radio.
Right, yeah, exactly. Even better on radio. Yeah. Yeah, my viewers love it when I engage in silence. So, it's a joke.
Yeah.
Can we start with a Naropa bow
Yes,
of respect?
of course.
So if you're watching this, you could join us in a bow of respect to Parker Palmer and also to what we're discussing at Naropa University. You're here to offer their commencement address. Thank you. Parker. So you've been here before a few times.
I have, yes.
Yeah.
I was here with Reb Zalman Schachter,
Yeah.
probably 20 years ago, and Houston Smith. We were
Yeah.
in dialogue on stage. It was a wonderful conference on spirituality and higher education, which was kind of a breakthrough event in this country. So I've always remembered Naropa as a kind of groundbreaking institution.
How did that event come about? Did you organize that?
No, it was created by folks here. I think Judith Zimmer Brown had a great deal to do with it. 800 people showed up under a big tent on the lawn out here, and it had a huge impact. One of the most interesting things to me was that a few years later, Harvard and Wellesley co-sponsored an identical conference on spirituality and higher education, which was the first time in this country that that topic had been taken up by a couple of the major league players. Right. And it was very clear that the people who came to Naropa and were influenced by that conference a few years earlier felt such significance and credibility around this subject that that's why it migrated into the Ivy League.
Yeah. So I guess my question would be, what does spirituality mean in this context, in the context of education, which you've devoted your life to?
Right.
Because it's not religion,
no,
particularly, but it can be.
It can be, not necessarily. So I have Waylon, I have a working definition of spirituality that I like to think about and play with. So it seems to me that spirituality is any way that a person answers the eternal human yearning to be connected with something larger than your own ego. So if we're lost in ego, we're very lonely and we're very pathetic and we feel it, and we're not at home in our own skin and we're not at home on the face of the earth. But if we're connected with something larger, maybe as large as Gaia or the human race or whatever, what results is a different kind of life, a happier life, a more grounded and comfortable life. But the thing I like about the definition is that it's value neutral. I mean, there have been some very good answers to that eternal human yearning, and there have been some very bad answers, some evil answers. The Third Reich was a response to the eternal human yearning to be connected with something larger than your own ego. So in higher education, where it seems to me all the definitions have to be open so that we can explore and debate and look at things from different angles, spirituality has a very definite place because these are life questions, fundamental questions in the lives of individuals, societies, drivers of human history that we need to be studying from a variety of viewpoints to turn people loose in the world as thoughtful, critical thinkers when it comes to everything from spirituality to economics to politics to whatever else we may care about.
Well, a lot comes to mind with what you just said, but I had this wonderful teacher at my high school, and he said, I'm not going to teach you what to think, I'm going to teach you how to think, critical thinking. I'm not going to try and control you. I think it's a wonderful sentence for parents as well.
Right.
The only way you can trust your kid is if you can trust their own critical intelligence.
Absolutely, yeah. I know when I started doing some out-of-the-box things and my parents were kind of startled and asking me critical questions, I said, well, I'm just doing what you taught me to think for myself, you know, and it's a good thing. So I think it applies to this whole question of spirituality in higher education, because when people hear that word spirituality, they immediately think of proselytizing or trying to control someone's beliefs. But if you open up the definition, then you have an opportunity to explore the driving role of spiritual commitments, for better and for worse, in human history. I mean, it appalls me that intelligent people can look around at what's happening in the world today with Judaism, with Christianity, with Islam, and say, no, religion and spirituality have no place in higher education. And how can that be? There's no intelligence in that assessment at all.
Well, it's the same exact notion, which is obviously well-intentioned but mistaken, when parents or whoever say no politics at the dinner table. You're just trying to get rid of this chaotic, difficult stuff, which you can't.
Keep it simple.
So how do you bring that, whatever is missing in higher education or education generally, in without creating all kinds of, the fractions and the difficulties we're seeing in Islam and Judaism? And
well, I think it's precisely those struggles that you have to put on the table in a teaching and learning environment.
So that's pretty brave. You write about that.
You have to be
courage
brave,
word.
the courage to teach. Absolutely, you have to be brave to do that. But it seems to me that bravery comes with the intellectual life and with the spiritual life, the willingness to go into that which we don't know. Which is always alien territory and scary territory and uncomfortable territory. But that's the whole purpose of education. That's what makes education different from indoctrination.
I love your definition, because often I think of spirituality as going inward, but your definition was more about thinking about something bigger than yourself, which could also be the definition of activism or social good.
Absolutely, yeah.
Service.
And I think I often talk about life on the Mobius strip, which is just an image for me, that very interesting form that is a three-dimensional shape, but it has only one side.
Right.
If you trace around it, what looks like the inside surface becomes the outside surface, and what looks like the outside becomes the inside. So I think that's the way life works. That's the way we co-create reality. This interaction between what's within us and what's outside of us. And I think you're absolutely right. At least I share this conviction that if spirituality simply ends up going inward and creating personal comfort, I mean, I'm not against personal comfort, but what's the difference between that and narcissism? My favorite book title these days is a collection of poems by Tony Hoagland called What Narcissism Means to Me. Because I think this is stuff we need to laugh at. You know?
That's great.
There's too much inwardness. So, but the great traditions have always understood that this inner journey has to emerge into the outer world in a transformed life. And then you're challenged to take in what the world throws back at you, and sometimes allow that to help shape you. I mean, there are critiques that you need to hear. And sometimes to process it in a way that says, I'm not going to let that message of commercialism or racism or sexism or homophobia or whatever, I'm not going to let that control me. I'm going to process that in a different way. It's not going to deform my life.
You were at that spirituality and education conference. There was a moment of thunder and lightning, right? Could you tell us that little story?
Well, it was a lovely, lovely moment, Waylon. So thank you for asking about it. Yes, Reb Zalman Schachter, who was an old friend of mine.
Yeah, we've interviewed him a few times.
Wonderful man. And Houston Smith, the great world religion scholar, were on stage. And I have this vivid visual memory of Reb Zalman sitting there looking for all the world like a prophet who had walked right out of the Hebrew Bible. And Houston Smith sitting there looking like a New England wasp from Central Casting. That was Houston's appearance. So they were debating some point of theology. I can't remember what it was. But the debate wasn't angry, but it was vigorous. And Reb Zalman had said something, and Houston was shaking his finger back and saying, I don't think that's the way it is, when suddenly, in the middle of this thunderstorm that we sort of knew was coming, we were 800 people under a tent on the Naropa lawn. Suddenly there was this enormous thunderclap and a lightning strike that felt like it was going to take the tent apart, and the audience just went just went dead silent. And out of that silence, Houston said, okay, I yield. I get it.
That's great.
It's like Zalman had the capacity to call down the God of the,
a higher authority
of the Hebrew Bible, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
I think he might have. Yeah.
I think he might have.
Yeah, I was reminded that you talked about that last night, which was very funny, because you were just saying you can let the world critique and inform you, but at the same time, there are problems with the world that maybe. What were you just saying about that?
Well, you have to, absolutely, you have to push back on it.
Push back.
So the world is, on the Mobius strip, the world is constantly tossing stuff our way, partly in response to what we put out in the world.
Right.
So, one of my questions is, what do I want to put out in the world to help co-create the reality that's out there? And what might I get back in response to that? And I want to put kindness into the world, and I'm sure you do, and I'm sure all people trying to live a good life do. But we all know that sometimes when you put kindness out there, what you get back is unkindness.
Sure.
Right? It's not like kindness is a done deal in our world.
Just look at the internet, right?
Exactly.
Or bullying in schools.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can put out the most intelligent stuff and get just palpable nonsense back and personal attacks. So then you have to decide, how am I going to take that in, internalize it, work with it, process it, respond to it, so that if your intention is to keep co-creating a better reality, your actions and your words are actually doing that. So I have this, I suppose a central question of my spiritual life is, how can I travel the Mobius strip of my own life with such high awareness of this constant inner-outer exchange that I can, on balance, make choices about it that are more life-giving than death-dealing? To me, that's a very open and very evocative question. There's no particular creed attached to it. There's no particular belief system, but it's about my choice making and taking responsibility for the fact that I'm co-creating the world. And what interests me about that is that, when I think about it, we have a lot of different locations in the inner landscape of our lives. I have a place of fear in me. I think most people do. And sometimes I find myself tempted to move toward the world from that place of fear. But if I'm on a constant inner exploration, I realize, there's also a place of goodwill, of hope. I can stand in another place and move toward the world from there. I can have my fears, but I don't need to be my fears. And I think that's one way of understanding. The best way to travel the Mobius strip is to be constantly reflective about where it is I'm coming from as I move into the outer world, and then how I internalize and process what the world gives back.
Yeah, in Buddhism, Pema Chodron or Trungpa Rinpoche, they'll talk about how, or even Winston Churchill has a quote about fear, and Winston Churchill obviously went through intense depression, which I know you've talked about. He said the only way out is through. So I like how you talked about it, but you're not pushing it away or compartmentalizing it, right? You're not ignoring it.
Not at all.
Or suppressing it.
No, I think I was raised in the Christian tradition, and I'm a Quaker, which is a branch of Christianity. And I've often thought about the biblical admonition, be not afraid. And I think for a while in my younger life, I thought, I have these fears, I must be a bad person. And then I listened more carefully to those words. Those words don't say you can't have fear. They say you don't need to be your fear. And
that's helpful.
And that's a
you don't have to buy into it.
Exactly. It's
That's
a powerful distinction.
Yeah. So in Buddhism, the reason I brought up that thunderclap moment, which other than it being delightful, is in Buddhism there's the Vajra, the Dorje. Do you know that symbol?
I don't.
So what it does is it's a symbol of lightning, which is interesting. But it has holes in it, so it blocks. So there's blades and there's holes in it, and the blades block neuroses, like whether it's aggression or fear or whatever, or they cut it. But the holes allow in the energy and the kind of the wakeful, the hope kind of, as you were saying.
Yeah, nice. So that negative emotions have an energy that can be taken somewhere.
And have to be, right?
Yeah, absolutely have to be. Yeah.
So I thought that was a good symbol to go with the Mobius strip.
It is, absolutely. Maybe. I mean, one of the things that's fairly well known, and as you say, I've had 3 deep experiences of clinical depression in my 76 years of life. It's pretty well known that a lot of depression is anger repressed, anger unrecognized, anger swept under the carpet or pushed out of sight, people think. But you don't take a powerful emotion like that and get rid of it. You simply transform it into something that's death-dealing. So what do I do with my anger? Is there some way to ride my anger towards something that's life-giving? And I have found that a very helpful. I mean, it's like a horse, right?
Right. Exactly.
That you can ride anger towards something actually loving in the world, something worth doing, something that contributes to well-being.
Yeah, my experience of anger is it's an actual sane reaction to something that is off, but then it's just frustration and inability to deal with it.
Exactly.
And it obviously is unhelpful reaction.
And I think we'd agree too that depression can be a sane reaction to what's going on in our world or what's going on in our own lives.
Yeah, if you're not deeply brokenhearted right now, you're not paying attention.
Yeah, and that's another topic we could talk about someday, brokenheartedness.
Wow. Thank you so much. Parker Palmer.
Thank you, Waylon. Thank you.
The authority granted to me as provost, and with the support of the president and the faculty of Naropa University, I confer upon Parker J. Palmer the degree of Doctor of Contemplative Education, honoris causa.
I did not expect this, and it kind of blows me away, but I just have to tell you my first response. I'm thinking back to the 5 long, hard years I spent at Berkeley in the 60s trying to get a PhD, finally getting one. I wish I had known at the time that you could get one in about 90 seconds. So let me just say, if any of you guys are planning to go to grad school for an advanced degree, scratch that plan, go get a job, wait about 50 years, and you get one of these.